So, you pulled for Hugo. You probably pulled for him because you like hot vampire men. Or you're like me and your neurons just start firing when you see scythe characters. So now that you have him, or looking to see if you want to pull for him, I thought I would go over basically how to play him and whether he is worth it or not. So here's a guy that you could sink your teeth into. Get it? Because he's a vampire? So first we should go over his core skill, because this is where he really shines. For one, when using Hugo's chain attacks, or when Hugo's attacks stun a character, Hugo enters the Dark Abyss Reverb state for 6 seconds. In this state, Hugo's crit rate increases by 12% and his crit damage increases by 25%. Stun characters also increase Hugo's attacks. One stun character gives you an extra 300 attack, and 2 stun characters give you an extra 900 attack. Now for the real juicy part is his totalize. When an enemy is in his stun phase, using your special skill or your ultimate will trigger the totalize effect, which increases the skill's finishing move by 1000%. But not only do you get that flat 1000, but depending how much is left in the enemy's stun phase, you get an extra damage multiplier. Here's the math for the damage multiplier for each second you get that's left in the enemy's stun phase. But honestly, I don't think you really care about the math. All you really want me to tell you is when the enemy is stunned, hit that big purple button or the big yellow button and you do giga damage. When you trigger totalize, it basically ends the enemy's stun state, so it's kind of like a trade-off between a no stun phase for more damage. But not only do you get that extra damage multiplier for how much is left in the enemy's stun phase, you also accumulate days depending on how much is left. You get 5% for each second that is left with a max of 25%. So basically you just have to trigger that totalize before 5 seconds is left in his stun phase to get that maximum of 25% days. So what I've been doing is stunning the enemy with my stunners and then just ending the chain attack and just either special skilling or ultimate to trigger that totalize. Therefore, I could get the most amount of damage with my totalize. And then another thing I wanted to mention too with his basic attack, if you do 4 basic attacks in a row and on the 4th one you do a charged attack, increases anti-interrupt levels and you take 40% less damage. Also doing a base attack after a dash triggers this too. So for upgrading your skills, you want to focus on his core skill first and then his special skill and ultimate, so you could do totally Vlad damage for his totalize. Vlad, because he's Hugo Vlad. Now to his W engine. Of course, his best W engine is his signature. I used Ellen's for most of this review, mostly just because I wanted to save for G1 and the Panda. But the more and more I read his description for his W engine, the more and more I realize how kind of insane this W engine is. Not only does it give you crit rate when you upgrade it, but it also just gives you 45 crit damage right off the bat. But also when you use your special skill, chain attack, or ultimate when dealing ice damage, it ignores 25% of the enemy's defense. So if you are going to get Hugo and don't really care about saving for some of the older characters that we're going to get, I would recommend getting his W engine because it's going to increase his damage output. But for his 4-star options, I believe the best one for him is Mercado Desire because it gives you an attack buff of 9.6% when using your special skill or your chain attack. But the thing is, it also does give you an additional 9.6 when the target is under an attribute anomaly. While using Lycon with him, I felt like I was freezing him quite a bit, so that additional 9.6 was not going to waste. Others that are still pretty good are Cannon Rotor or Gilded Blossom. Now for the disc set. I tested 2 4-pieces, Woodpecker Electro and Hormone Punk. Now, Hormone Punk provides a lot more attack boost than Woodpecker Electro when switching off to Hugo. The issue is though, once you activate the buff starts for 10 seconds, and then after that 10 seconds up, it has a 10-second cooldown. So really with Hormone Punk, to be able to utilize that full attack buff, you really need to time your rotations around that 10-second cooldown. But if you don't want to focus on that, with Woodpecker Electro, you still get an attack buff when using your basic or special attack. It's just not as much as Hormone Punk, but it is easier to keep the buff in place. For the 2-piece, I currently have the Branches and Blade Song just for the crit damage. If you are able to get enough substats to get your crit damage to the recommended amount, then you could go for the Polar Metal, or if you have the Hormone Punk as a 4-piece and need crit rate, you could do a 2-piece of the Woodpecker Electro. So one thing I would do if I were to refine my build right now, if I did have his W engine, since it gives you so much crit damage, I wouldn't need Branches and Blade Song. So I'd probably do a 4-piece Hormone Punk and the 2-piece of the Woodpecker Electro and just try to learn how to play around that 10-second buff. The 2 Mindscapes that stick out to me the most are Mindscape 2 and Mindscape 6. With the Mindscape 2, Hugo's ultimate does not end the stun phase when Totalize is triggered. So basically when you stun an enemy, you could ult and then also do a special attack to Totalize twice, which is pretty cool. The interesting thing about Mindscape 6 to me is it allows you to trigger Totalize without an enemy being stunned. Granted, you don't get that damage multiplier based on how much the enemy has left in his stun phase because it's not the stun phase, which means you're not doing the insane amount of damage you would be if it is stunned, but it just makes it so he's not totally dependent on the stun phase. So if you really want to invest into Hugo and are willing to use all those master tapes you saved up, or willing to drop some cash, then those are the ones I suggest you go for. Even though it does make him pretty strong, in general, I don't really advise M6ing any character just because how much money it is, but hey, if you have the disposable income and you want to get that shirtless Hugo Mindscape, who am I to tell you what to spend your money on? Now, the one team I have been seeing recommended is the team I like to call the Divorced Fairy Tale Dads and their son, Sung Jinwoo. Arise. Obviously, this would seem like his best team just because it's 2 stunners, so it gives him the full 900 attack boost. But also, both these stunners do provide some ice damage boosts. While this team is pretty good, I wanted to try out something else. You know, Hugo relies on having the enemy stun quickly. So I just wish there was a way to have a stun character on the field and also one off the field. But like, what kind of character does that? Now, you're probably thinking, Spencer, Trigger? I'm trying to play with all dudes, but hey, I'm not trying to ruin your all-male fantasy. I'm just suggesting this as an alternative. And when testing it, it honestly wasn't too much faster. It might be because my trigger is not as built as my Lycon, plus Lycon does do the ice damage boost. So maybe that was why trigger did not feel that fast. It did feel like I was stunning the enemy really fast. My clear times just weren't showing that. Even though in my test it didn't seem like she was better than Lycon, it did seem like she was still pretty good. So if you do not have Lycon, Trigger I do think is a good alternative. Lighter is his best one just because of the amount of ice damage boost that he does provide. But if you are doing 2 stunners, I would suggest either have Lighter and Lycon or Lighter or Trigger. But honestly, you could use most stunners with him if you are looking for other alternatives. I did also find one stunner and also a support to be pretty good too, especially Astra Lighter Lycon. Even though you do miss out on the 900 attack, Astra is still able to provide attack buffs that seem like were able to make up for that loss. And if you don't have Astra, Sokaku does work pretty well too, but I would say the best team for me, at least the best time, was Lycon and Lighter. Now, Hugo relies on the enemy being stunned, which makes the enemy's like bringer super hard because you can't stun his like little arm thingy. Hugo is not really great at killing the arm fast enough to skip the sword phase, at least for me. I even tried to keep him stunned before he was able to pull out his arm, but it would just stop at 99 on his stun meter and freaking pull out that stupid arm. It made me feel like I was using Firefly against an enemy that can't break. Another enemy that felt not really difficult, but I felt like Ellen was a better choice, was the Marionette from this week's Deadly Assault. It just felt a lot easier with Ellen to kill those dummies in time. Now, I don't think he's a bad unit. I just feel like he is limited compared to the other DPS characters that we have, especially Miyabi, who could basically do anything. Even with that, I think Hugo was really fun to use. I like how he makes me think a lot more about my stun characters and how I could use them to stun the enemy as fast as possible, and what else they have that can provide me with buffs to help with my totalize. So if you are looking for an ice DPS, I think he is a really good choice, but we already have some pretty good options that I don't think are as limited as Hugo. So if you're on the fence and you already have like a Miyabi or an Ellen, and maybe you want to wait till 2.0 to see other characters you want to pull for, then I would say to skip it and maybe just wait for his rerun. I do have a prediction though where I think that if we do get a really good stunner that works better for him in the future, then he might come back into meta. But if you really just like the character, then I would say just pull it. Just pull it. I mean, I would say just pull for him. At the end of the day, just pull for what characters make you happy. But if you are going to pull for him, I would suggest getting lighter to help him out and getting his W engine to fully maximize his potential. And that's all I got for you today. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed, please hit that like and subscribe button. It really helps me out. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any suggestions on how I could improve my Hugo build or maybe something I missed, please let me know down in the comments. I am always looking to improve. This is my first kind of review video. If you do have any suggestions for other characters that you want me to go through, or just any video that you want me to make Zenless on Zero related, please let me know down in the comments too. But yeah, thank you for watching, and bye-bye.